The cargo bay of a steadfast resolve smelled like coolant fluid and dry metal. It always did. Most crew members passed through it quickly, grabbed what they needed, and left. Nobody stayed in the cargo bay unless they had to. Nora stayed there every evening. She sat on a flat storage crate near the back wall, eating from a small container she brought from the mess hall. The lights in that corner were dimmer than the rest of the bay. She liked it that way. She could see the whole room from there. The crates stacked by the loading dock, the two entry doors, the ventilation panel that rattled slightly every 40 seconds because of a loose bolt nobody had fixed in 3 months. She had already filed a report about the bolt. Twice. Grail noticed her the same way he noticed most things on this ship, by accident, and then all at once. He had come down to check the weapon storage lockers at the far end of the bay. He did his check, marked his log, and was halfway to the door when he saw her sitting there in the dim corner, completely still, reading something on her datapad. That he stopped. She did not look up. Grail was Vorith. His people were tall, broad, and covered in dark gray scales that thickened at the shoulders and along the jaw. They had been warriors for a long time before they became peacekeepers. Old habits lived in the way they stood, the way they watched a room, the way they judged others. He watched Nora for a moment the way he would watch any unknown variable, trying to place her, categorize her, understand what she was. He could not place her. She was small, even by human standards. Quiet. She had been on this ship for 4 months, and he could not recall a single meeting where she had spoken unless someone asked her a direct question. She worked in logistics. She managed cargo manifests, supply routes, and resource allocation. Important work? Technically, but invisible. The kind of work that only got noticed when something went wrong. He walked over. "You eat here every evening," he said. It was not a question. She looked up. No surprise on her face. She had heard him coming. "It is quieter than the mess hall," she said. "It is also a cargo bay." "Yes," she said, and looked back at her datapad. Grail stood there for a moment, unsure why he had even started the conversation. He looked at what she was reading. It was not entertainment. It was a shipping log. She was reading a shipping log in her free time. "Is that work?" he asked. "I noticed something off in the manifest rotation," she said. 3 supply categories are being logged under the wrong weight class. It has been happening for 6 weeks. Nobody flagged it. Is it dangerous? Not yet. But if we hit a weight audit at the next station, we fail it. That delays departure by 2 days minimum. She tapped something on the pad. "I am fixing it now." Grail looked at her for another moment. Then he left. The next day, he asked Dren about her. Dren was the other human in the logistics division. Louder, more visible, the kind of person who told jokes at crew gatherings and whose name everyone knew. "Nora," Dren said, and shrugged. "She is just thorough. Does her work, keeps to herself. Good at what she does, but you would never know it from talking to her. She does not really talk. Does she have training? Security? Combat? Anything like that?" Dren laughed. "Nora? No." "What?" Grail did not answer. He thought about it through his shift. The Vorith had a saying that his father told him when he was young. It translated roughly as, "The one who does not roar has either nothing worth protecting or everything." The saying was meant to make young Vorith think before dismissing a quiet opponent. He had not thought about that saying in years. That he was thinking about it now. 3 days later, long-range sensors picked up a contact. Small vessel, no identification signal, moving in a pattern that matched no registered route in the sector. Commander Asa put the ship on elevated alert. The contact disappeared from sensors within the hour. That was worse. Grail attended the bridge briefing. Senior staff debated whether it was a sensor ghost or something deliberate. The Karen had been active in this sector. Everyone knew it. Nobody said it out loud, but it sat in the room like smoke. After the briefing, he walked back past the logistics office. The door was open. Nora was standing at her wall screen with a star map open and ship schematics on the secondary display. Her data pad sat on the desk with handwritten notes beside it. She was not looking at cargo manifests. He almost stopped. He kept walking. That evening, he came to the cargo bay again. Not for the weapon lockers. She was in her usual corner. Same crate, same dim light. As he turned to leave, he heard her say something quietly to herself. He caught only part of it. They always underestimate the quiet ones. He paused at the door and looked back. She was pulling up a schematic of the ship on her datapad, highlighting sections in the lower decks. Her finger moved slowly, tracing a path through areas that the internal security cameras did not fully cover. Grail stood very still for a long moment. Then he walked out and spent the rest of the night wondering exactly what kind of person he was sharing a ship with. The disappearing contact stayed off sensors for 16 hours, then it came back. Closer. Same irregular movement pattern, like something circling without wanting to look like it was circling. Commander Asa called a full senior staff briefing. Security, leads, navigation, engineering heads. The table was full. Nora was not invited. She was not senior staff. She attended anyway. She took a seat at the far end of the room, near the wall, with her data pad in her lap. Nobody told her to leave. Nobody really noticed she had arrived. Asa laid it out plainly. The vessel matched no registered signature in the Coalition database. It was running a low-emission profile, the kind used when a ship did not want to be tracked. It had been shadowing the steadfast Resolve for at least 2 days before they detected it. The current heading suggested it would be within intercept range in approximately 9 hours. The table erupted into overlapping voices. The engineering head wanted to increase speed. The navigation officer suggested a course correction toward the nearest patrol lane. One of the Vora's security leads recommended broadcasting an active challenge signal. Grail said nothing. He was watching Nora. She was writing, not slowly, the way people write when they're taking notes. Fast, like she was trying to keep up with thoughts, moving faster than her hand. Page after page on the data pad. The meeting ended without a firm decision. Asa told the senior staff to prepare contingency plans. People filed out. Grail held back, as so did Nora. She waited until the room was empty. Then she walked to the front, where Grail was standing, and held out her data pad. "They're not here for the ship," she said. He looked at the pad. She had a cargo breakdown on the screen, color-coded, with a specific section highlighted in red. "The medical supply crates," she said. 40 units of Verith-class regenerative compounds. We picked them up at Outpost Drell. The manifest lists them as general medical stock, but anyone with access to Coalition supply records knows what a Verith shipment looks like on a weight log. On the black market, that cargo is worth more than this entire vessel. Grail stared at the screen. "How do you know that?" "I looked up the last 3 confirmed Karen raids in this sector." She scrolled down. The information was organized in a clean table. Raid date, target vessel, confirmed stolen cargo, estimated black market value. All 3 raids had one thing in common. Medical compounds. High grade, high value, hard to manufacture. "The Karen are practical," Norris said. "They do not attack Coalition ships for sport. They have a market. They have buyers. They are here because we have something specific, and they have already calculated that the profit is worth the risk." Grail read through her notes slowly. She had cross-referenced the scout vessel's last known approach vector with the location of the cargo bay. The angle was not accidental. It pointed almost exactly at the loading dock on the port side, the same side where the medical crates were currently stored. "This is thorough," he said, and heard how thin the word sounded the moment it left his mouth. "I have a plan," she said, "if you are willing to take it to Commander Asa." He looked at her. "Why do you need me to take it?" She looked back at him steadily. "Because she will listen to you in the first 30 seconds. With me, she will spend the first 2 minutes deciding if I am supposed to be in a room." He did not argue with that. He took the datapad to Asa. He presented the analysis. Asa listened, and at the end she asked one question. "Who put this together?" Grail told her. There was a brief pause. Then Asa said, "Bring her in." Nora presented the plan without nerves, without hesitation, and without trying to make it sound more impressive than it was. The medical crates needed to move. A false manifest needed to replace the real one in the ship's external broadcast data, the kind of surface information a scanning vessel could read passively. The real crates go to a secondary location. A decoy package takes their place, identical weight, identical container markings. Then they wait. If the Karen were reading their data before moving, they would board expecting to find what the manifest said. and it would find something else entirely. Asa was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "And if they do not board? If they simply destroy us from range?" "They will not," Nora said. "The compounds cannot survive a weapon strike. They need the cargo intact. They will board." Asa approved the plan. 2 hours later, the crates were moved. 6 hours after that, the Karen vessel reappeared on sensors. It had dropped its low-emission profile. It was no longer trying to hide. It was heading directly for the port loading dock. Grail stood at the sensor station and watched the contact grow on the screen. He thought about what Nora had said in the meeting room. Not the plan itself. The part before it. The part about how she had to hand her work to someone else just to get it through a door. That he thought about that for a long time. Then he went to find her. The ship went to silent, running 40 minutes before contact. Non-essential systems powered down. Interior lighting dropped to half. The corridors felt narrower in the dim, and the usual hum of the engines faded to something quieter and more careful. The crew moved to their stations without being told twice. Even the loudest people on the steadfast resolve understood what silence meant right now. A team meant the Karen were close enough to hear them. Grail found Nora in the cargo bay. She was standing near the decoy crates in the center of the room, running her hand along the edge of one container, checking the markings, making sure they matched. "You should go to a secure section," he said. "I need to be here," she said. "This is not your post. The decoy is my plan. If something is wrong with the setup, I need to be the one to fix it. I know what to look for." She glanced at him. "You can stay if you want." He stayed. They turned off the cargo bay lights and waited in the dark. Grail positioned himself near the secondary entry door with his sidearm ready. Nora stood near the crates. He could barely see her. She made no sound. The ship shuddered once, a docking collar engaging on the port side. Not a request, not a hail, just contact hard and fast. The Karen did not ask permission to come aboard. Comms crackled. The security team in the main corridor made contact with the boarding party. For Karen, maybe 5, moving fast toward the interior. The security team's job was to keep them busy, make it look like resistance was the whole response. Keep them from thinking too hard about what they were actually walking toward. 2 minutes passed. Then the bay's exterior sensor blinked once on Nora's datapad. She had rigged a passive alert to the corridor outside. 3 coming this way, she said, barely above a whisper. Grail moved to the door. "I will take them in the corridor." "Wait," she said. "Nora, wait." He stopped. He did not know why he listened. Some part of him had already started recalibrating what her instructions were worth. 10 seconds later, he heard it from the corridor outside. The heavy, uneven footfall of something fighting against unexpected weight. A thud, then another, then a low sound, almost like anger, except flatter. The Karen did not express pain the way other species did, but they expressed being slowed down. "Gravity reroute," Nora said quietly. "I asked engineering to give me manual control of the gravity grid in that corridor 2 hours ago. Karen biology is built for low-G environments. At 1.8 standard, their muscles are working twice as hard as usual." She paused. It will not stop them, but it buys time. 2 of the 3 did not make it through the door. The third did. It came through fast despite the gravity drag, weapon raised, scanning the dark bay. It was large, larger than Grail expected. The Karen were gray-skinned, 4-limbed, with wide flat eyes that caught the minimal light in the room. This one moved directly toward the decoy crates. Nora was standing 3 steps to the left of them. The Karen saw her. It swung the weapon toward her. Grail started to move. She was faster. She did not run. She did not shout. She took 1 step to the right, let the weapon track her, and then dropped low and moved left in the same breath. The weapon swung wide of where she had been, and in the space between 1 second and the next she was inside the Karen's reach. One hand redirected the weapon arm up and outward. Her other shoulder drove hard into the creature's midsection at the exact moment its balance was already fighting the extra gravity. IT went face first into the cargo container behind it with a sound like a door slamming shut. IT did not get up. Grail stood very still with his weapon half raised. Nora stepped back, checked that the Karen was not moving, and picked up her datapad from the crate where she had left it. She pulled up the comms channel. 3 secured in the cargo bay, she said. 1 detained, 2 still in the corridor. Grail, can you check on the 2 outside? He did not move right away. He was looking at her. She looked back at him. Are you all right? You have done that before, he said. Once or twice, she said. Can you check the corridor? He went to the door. The 2 Karen outside were down, fighting the gravity and losing. He secured them quickly. When he came back, Nora had zip-tied the one inside with cargo restraints she had clearly already set aside before the Karen ever arrived. She had prepared restraints. She had planned for this exact outcome. Grail crouched next to the secured Karen and stared at the floor for a moment. Then he stood up, looked at Nora, and said nothing because there was nothing to say that would have fit in the same sentence as what he had just watched. Now we move, she said, already walking toward the door that he followed. Grail had been in 11 combat situations in his career as a Vorth security officer. He had trained alongside soldiers from 6 different species. He knew what a trained fighter looked like, the stance, the breathing, the way their eyes moved before their body did. Nora had none of those signs. She walked through the ship's lower corridor like she was going to check a supply shelf. Head level, steps unhurried, no visible tension in her shoulders, no hand near any weapon. She looked exactly the way she had looked every single day for the past 4 months, like someone who was on her way to do something small and unimportant, and then a Karen came around the corner and she was already moving before it finished raising its weapon. The second engagement lasted 4 seconds. Grail saw it from 2 steps behind her. She did not fight the way trained soldiers fought. There were no wide stances, no power strikes, no attempt to overpower. She moved like water, finding the lowest point. Every motion was small and used the Karen's own movement against it. When it was over, the Karen was on the floor and she was already looking at the next corridor. Where did you learn that? Grail asked. Section 9 of Titan Station, she said, still moving. Where I grew up. Not exactly the safe part. You grew up in a habitat station, the industrial ring. 6,000 people in a space built for 4,000. If you were small and quiet, you either learned to pay attention or you had a very bad time. She glanced at him. I paid attention. Grail filed that away. The 3rd Karen they found was trying to retreat. It had turned around somewhere in the middle of the ship, realized the boarding operation was failing, and was now moving back toward the docking collar at a fast walk. It had not yet reached the port corridor. T never would. Nora had already locked the docking collar remotely from her datapad. She had done it quietly at some point between the cargo bay and this corridor without announcing it, without asking permission from a bridge. Grail had not even seen her do it. When you were securing the 2 in the corridor, she said. I sent a request to engineering. They processed it without asking why. My clearance covers emergency cargo lock protocols, and the docking collar counts as a cargo access point. She shrugged. It is in the regulations. Page 41. The trapped Karen realized what had happened about 30 seconds after they did. It turned and saw them. It had a weapon. Grail raised his. The Karen looked at Nora. Something passed across its flat, wide eyes, a recalculation. It had seen her in the cargo bay feed, perhaps. Or maybe it simply read something in the way she stood. T lowered the weapon and put it on the floor. Grail blinked. The Karen sat down. Nora walked forward, picked up the weapon, and called the bridge. Final contact secured in the port corridor. Boarding party is down. Recommend security team collect from 3 locations. She gave the locations. Then she clipped the confiscated weapon to her belt because she apparently had a belt clip designed for exactly that size of weapon, and Grail realized she had thought about that too. He stood in the corridor and tried to remember the last time a situation had resolved itself this completely without him being the primary cause that he could not remember. The main security team arrived 4 minutes later. They found 5 Karens secured, 0 coalition casualties, and Nora standing near the port bulkhead, writing something on her datapad. The security team leader, a Lindari named SOV, looked at her, looked at Grail, and then looked at the Karen on the floor. You 2 did all of this? SOV asked. She did most of it, Grail said. SOV looked at Nora again. Nora did not look up from her datapad. Commander Asa's voice came through on comms. Report. Grail answered. He gave a summary. Boarding party neutralized. All contact secured. No injuries. There was a pause from Asa's end. Then she said, "The Karen vessel has broken contact and is running. They left their boarding team behind." Another pause. "That is not something the Karen do," Asa said. "No," Grail agreed. "It is not." He looked at Nora. She had finished writing and was reviewing her notes. She looked up, met his eyes, and for a moment neither of them said anything. Grail thought about the Vorith saying his father had taught him when he was young. The one about the unmoving river. He had thought about it as a warning then, do not underestimate what is still. He understood now that he had only learned half of it. The other half was this: the river does not move because it does not need to. It has already decided where it is going. And by the time you realize that the canyon is already cut, he said it aloud, in his own language. It came out quietly, almost to himself. Nora tilted her head. "What does that mean?" "Something my father told me," he said. "I think I finally understand it." She looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded, just once, like someone who already knew the answer to a question and was glad someone else had finally caught up. "Yeah," she said. "Something like that." Word traveled fast on a ship of 300 HFY. By the time Nora ate breakfast the next morning, something had changed. It was not loud. Nobody clapped when she walked into the mess hall. No announcement was made. But people looked at her differently. A Vorith crew member she had never spoken to turned and gave her a slow, deliberate nod as she passed, the kind reserved, in their culture, for someone who had demonstrated something worth respecting. Two of the navigation techs made space at their table without being asked. Drin stared at her from across the room with an expression somewhere between amazement and mild offense, like someone who had lived next door to a landmark for years without realizing what it was. "You took down 3 Karen," he said when she sat down. "Grail helped," she said. "He said you did most of it." She ate her food. "He is being modest." "Nora," Drin set down his cup, "I work with you every day. I have never seen you do anything that looked even slightly like what you apparently did last night." "You were not looking," she said simply, and that was the end of it. Commander Asa held the formal debrief at midday. All relevant crew were present. She asked Nora to walk through every decision from the moment she first identified the threat. Nora did it plainly, in order, without softening any part of it or adding drama. She showed her notes. She explained the cargo analysis, the approach vector calculation, the gravity reroute request, the docking collar lock, the restraints she had set aside in advance. When she finished, the room was quiet. Then one of the senior engineers, a Lindari named Was, who had been on Coalition vessel for 30 years, raised a hand. "I want to understand something," he said. "You identified the risk, built the plan, and ran the operation. Why did none of this appear before the briefing? Why did nobody know you were capable of this?" Nora looked at him. "Because nobody asked," she said. "I do my work. I do it well. I have never been invited to a senior briefing before yesterday. My role is logistics. People see the label and they stop reading." Was said nothing. He had been in that first briefing. He had not noticed her arrive. Asa spoke. "That is on us," she said. It was not an apology. Asa did not traffic in apologies. It was a statement of fact, and she delivered it the same way she delivered everything, directly, without decoration. The Coalition's crew integration framework is built on visible performance. Meetings, reports, rank. It does not account for the kind of work that happens quietly. That is a structural failure, and I am logging it as such in my command report. She looked at Nora. "I'm also recommending you for a tactical assessment review. If your scores match what I saw last night, we will be adjusting your role on this ship." Nora nodded. She did not smile, did not protest. She just nodded, the way someone nods when something they expected to take much longer has finally arrived. Grail formally submitted a request after the debrief to have Nora designated as a tactical consultant to the security division. Asa approved it within the hour. In the evening, Drin found Nora in the logistics office and sat across from her for a long moment before speaking. "I had no idea," he said. "I know," she said. "I work with you every day," he said again, like repetition might help it make more sense. "You are not a bad observer, Drin," she said. "You just observe the things people show you. There's nothing wrong with that. is how most people work. She paused. I observe the things people do not show. Different habit, different outcome. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, were you ever going to say anything? About any of it? She thought about it. If it had mattered, yes. Last week it did not matter. This week it did. Dren leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. That is either very wise or very frustrating. Probably both, she said. He laughed. It was the first time in that conversation she had let anything resembling a smile show, and it lasted only a second, but it was there. Later that night, a signal came through from Coalition intelligence. The Karen vessel that had attacked them had been broadcasting on open channels, not to Coalition stations, but to other Karen ships in the sector. The content had been decoded and flagged for the steadfast resolve specifically. The message named the ship. It described the failed boarding. And then it named Nora, not by title, not by rank, by name. The Karen had pulled her identity from the manifest and used it. The message was short. It amounted to a warning distributed to every Karen vessel operating in the sector. Nora read the decoded text in her book. She read it twice. She set the data pad on her knee and looked at the wall for a moment. Then she got up, went to find Grail, and handed him the message. That he read it. His jaw tightened. This means they will be more careful next time, she said. It means they are afraid, Grail said. She looked at the message once more. Then she handed the pad back. Good, she said quietly. She walked back to her bunk. In the corridor behind her, Grail stood holding the message. And for the first time in a long career of measuring people, he realized he had been using the wrong unit of measurement his entire life. Frontier Station Orov was a working station, industrial, loud, packed into a pressurized ring orbiting a dim red star. Fuel smell and recycled air. Vendors at every junction. The kind of place where nobody noticed you unless you made noise. Nora walked through it the same way she walked through the cargo bay on the steadfast resolve. Steady, quiet, watching everything. Grail walked beside her. He had adjusted how he moved when they were together, not protective exactly, but aware. Like he was reading the same room she was. Word had moved ahead of them on the station network. By the time they reached the second junction, 2 crew members from other dock vessels had looked at Nora's name tag and then her face with visible recalibration. One, a Vorith, broad and scarred, long-haul markings on his jacket, gave her a slow, deliberate nod. The formal kind, Grail noticed. He said nothing, but his posture shifted slightly. They were passing a junction near the station's data exchange terminal when Nora stopped walking. She turned and looked at a small crowd near a supply vendor 40 meters away. People buying food, talking, moving. Nothing unusual at a glance. She watched for 10 seconds. That one, she said quietly, and tilted her head toward a figure at the edge of the crowd. Medium height, wearing neutral station worker clothes that did not quite fit the way station workers wear their clothes. Standing still in a place where no one stood still. Looking at the steadfast resolve's docking bay without looking like they were looking. Karen informant, she said. Grail looked. He was very good at reading crowds. He had not seen it. He pulled up his comms and called station security. He described the location and the figure. Security moved in from 2 sides inside of 2 minutes. The figure tried to leave and was stopped at a secondary junction. Station security confirmed later that the individual had a Karen contact flag in their records. They had been tasked with collecting ship manifests from dock Coalition vessels. Grail stood in the junction and stared at the now empty spot where the informant had been standing. You saw that in 10 seconds, he said. I saw it in 4, she said. I waited 6 more to be certain. He had nothing to say to that. The crew gathering that evening was held in one of the station's common rooms. Commander Asa said a few words. She did not give speeches often. When she did, they were short and carried more weight for it. She spoke about the Karen incident. She did not call it a victory. She called it a lesson the crew had been fortunate to receive at low cost. Then she said that the lesson was not about tactics or weapons or any skill that could be put in a training manual. It was about paying attention, about the habit of watching what other people ignore. She did not say Nora's name. She did not need to. Half the room was already looking in the same direction. Later, Grail found Nora at the edge of the room, away from the main noise. He sat beside her on a crate someone had left near the wall. Among the Vorath, he said, there are ranks given for different kinds of service. Most are given for strength, for aggression, for leading others into danger. He paused. There is one rank that has no translation in Galactic Standard. It is old. We do not give it often. It is given to the one who protects others not by standing in front of them, but by seeing what is coming before it arrives. Nora looked at him. He used the word. He said it in his own language, the way it was meant to be said, not loudly, but with full weight behind it. She was quiet for a moment. What does it mean exactly? The closest translation I can make is the one who already knew. She turned the phrase over. Then she nodded slowly. She returned to the ship before the gathering ended. The cargo bay was dim and quiet and smelled the same as always. She sat on her crate in the back corner and opened her data pad out of habit. A few minutes later, soft footsteps. One of the new crew members, a young Lindari barely out of their first posting, assigned to cargo tracking, who had been on the ship less than 2 weeks, came into the bay and stopped near the entrance. They found a nearby crate and sat on it. They did not say anything. Nora did not look up immediately. She let the quiet settle. Then she asked, "What did you notice on your first walk through this ship?" The recruit blinked. I do not know what you mean." Nora nodded slowly. "Then start paying attention to what everyone else ignores," she said. "That is where everything important is hiding." The recruit did not fully understand, but they took out their data pad and began writing. Nora watched them for a moment. Then she looked back at her own screen, and the corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but close enough. The galaxy had called her shy. Her crew had called her quiet. The Karen now whispered her name as a warning. And on the steadfast resolve, they called her the one who already knew. She had always been all of those things. Most people just needed longer to catch up.